Bradley Thorne decided to slash my salary in front of the entire executive team before he ever bothered to read the contract that protected it. That was his first big mistake. We were sitting in the 24th floor boardroom at Valor Transport Services, the kind of room built to make bad news look expensive. It had a long black wood table, frosted glass walls, and a gray city skyline behind the chief executive officer's chair. 12 executives sat around me, all pretending they had not already been warned to keep quiet and keep their heads down. Bradley stood at the screen with one hand in his pocket and the other holding a presentation remote. Behind him, a slide displayed the phrase, "Leadership Cost Reset." I hated that phrase the second it appeared. Corporate people always use clean words like reset when they want to hide something ugly. "My mandate is simple," Bradley said, his voice flat and rehearsed. "Valor has to become leaner, faster, and less dependent on legacy leadership." His eyes moved to me when he said legacy. My name is Daniel Albright. I was 45 years old at the time, and I was the Chief Operating Officer of Valor Transport Services. 5 years earlier, Valor was close to falling apart completely. We were losing drivers, losing cash, and losing clients faster than we could replace them. Trucks were sitting empty in gravel lots. Warehouses were missing critical delivery deadlines. And major retail customers were calling my personal line every morning, asking if they should move their freight to our competitors. I was the one who rebuilt the operating floor from the ground up. I renegotiated driver contracts when the company could barely meet its weekly payroll. I rebuilt our emergency routing command center after a massive winter storm nearly broke our entire Midwest network. I sat across table from fuel suppliers, warehouse managers, union representatives, and angry retail clients until the company started breathing again. I lived on black coffee and 3 hours of sleep a night for a year to keep this place from going under, but Bradley did not see any of that. He was a private equity placement, a guy who saw a company as a spreadsheet and people as numbers. He saw a man with too much authority, too much history, and a compensation package his friends on the board did not want to pay anymore. He clicked to the next slide. "Effective immediately, executive compensation will be aligned with current market reality," he said. No one in the room moved. The air went cold. Then he said my name. "Daniel Albright's salary will be reduced by 70%. His bonus plan will be frozen pending operational restructuring. Several operating divisions currently under his office will move under Julian Vance and the new strategy group." The room went completely silent. It was not shocked silence, it was prepared silence. Everyone had known except me. That was when I noticed Clara Finch from Human Resources sitting near the wall, with a folder already open on her lap. I noticed our Chief Financial Officer looking down at his pen instead of looking at me. I noticed Julian Vance trying not to smile. Julian had been at Valor for 9 months. He was 29 years old, had a degree from a school that cost more than my first house, and knew how to build beautiful slides. He could speak in investor phrases and say the word efficiency like it was a holy word. But he had never stood in a freezing warehouse at 3 o'clock in the morning, while a client threatened to pull a $400 million account. Now he was being handed my divisions. Bradley looked around the table, enjoying the silence and the feeling of control. "This is not personal, Daniel," he said. That was how I knew it was entirely personal. He continued, "Daniel's compensation was an expensive leftover from the old rescue era. That era is over." A few eyes moved toward me. Nobody defended me. Not one person in that room said the rescue era was the only reason they still had jobs to sit in. I kept my hands folded on the table. Inside, something cold and steady settled into place. I was not surprised by the cut. I was not even surprised by the insult. New chief executive officers often arrive with a broom and call it vision. But Bradley had done something very specific. He had cut my salary, frozen my bonus, stripped my duties, and reassigned my authority after a change in control. And he had done it in front of 12 executives. So I asked one simple question. "Is this an official company directive?" Bradley smiled, a thin, superior expression. "Yes, it is." I looked at Clara Finch, "and the salary reduction and authority transfer are effective immediately." She hesitated, looking at Bradley for a second, then said, "That is correct, Daniel." Bradley added, "You are expected to cooperate fully with the transition of these divisions to Julian." I nodded once, my expression completely flat. Understood. That was all I said. He thought my calm meant defeat. Julian thought he had just inherited an empire. Clara thought she was about to get my signature on the reduction agreement before lunch. But as Bradley moved to the next slide, I was not thinking about my salary. I was thinking about Section 14 of my executive agreement. The good reason clause. The clause written after the private equity takeover. The clause that said if Valor cut my pay, stripped my duties, or forced me under a lesser authority after a change in control, I could leave as if the company had pushed me out. And if that happened, my golden parachute activated. It was worth $110 million. Bradley thought he had just saved the company money. He had actually made the most expensive announcement of his career. Human Resources did not wait 5 minutes. The meeting ended at 9 o'clock and 42 minutes in the morning. At 9 o'clock and 44 minutes, a calendar invite appeared on my phone. The subject line read, Compensation Alignment and Transition Review, and the location was Human Resources Conference Room B. I looked at the invite, then at the hallway outside the boardroom. Clara Finch was already standing there, holding the same folder she had during Bradley's announcement. Daniel, she said softly, do you have a moment? It was not really a question. I followed her down to the Human Resources floor, past the glass offices and framed posters about corporate values that nobody in leadership had any intention of honoring. Conference Room B was small, windowless, and kept too cold. A printed packet was already waiting on the table before I even sat down. That told me everything I needed to know. The document was already dated, already approved, and already copied to payroll. My name was typed into every page. My salary reduction was written in clean black letters, as if my 20-year career in logistics were just a line item some private equity analyst had decided to trim. Clara sat across from me and folded her hands on the table. This is a necessary alignment measure, she said, using that soft corporate tone designed to make a robbery sound like a favor. The company is asking all senior leaders to support the new structure. All senior leaders? I asked. Her eyes flickered, looking away from mine. The reductions vary by role and department. Of course they did. Nobody else was taking a 70% cut. She slid a heavy silver pen toward me. If you sign today, we can make this transition smooth and ensure your transition bonus remains intact. I looked at the packet, but I did not touch the pen. The strangest part of it was not the money. It was how badly they misunderstood what they were taking. Valor's operations were not held together by corporate dashboards alone. They were held together by memory, by personal promises, by exceptions, and by trust. A national freight system looks simple on a slide deck. Trucks leave warehouses, goods reach stores, and clients pay invoices. In real life, one missed storm route can destroy an entire holiday retail season. One ignored driver agreement can shut down a shipping lane. One wrong warehouse promise can cost millions of dollars in penalties. I knew those pressure points because I had built the system after it broke. I knew which retail client needed direct escalation before any schedule change. I knew which driver groups needed notice before weekend shifts were moved. I knew which warehouses could handle a sudden overflow of freight and which ones only pretended they could. I knew the fuel hedge terms, the union side promises, the client penalty windows, and the crisis routing exceptions that never appeared in Julian's investor presentations. By noon, the electronic requests from Julian's team started coming in. They wanted my operations dashboards. They wanted administrator access to the routing exception system. They wanted the client escalation list. They wanted the driver retention files. They wanted the emergency playbook we used when storms, strikes, or warehouse shutdowns hit 3 regions at once. But every request proved the same thing. They wanted passwords, not judgment. They wanted reports, not history. They wanted the machine, but they did not want the scars that taught me where it cracked. One message from Julian's assistant asked for the full crisis response folder, preferably without my handwritten notes because they looked untidy. I almost laughed at that. The handwritten notes were the crisis response folder. Those notes explained why we made certain promises to specific clients, and which routes could never be cut without warning. Removing them was like removing labels from medicine bottles because the text looked messy. Clara cleared her throat, tapping her finger on the desk. Daniel, refusing to sign this document may be viewed as non-cooperation with leadership. I looked at her calmly. I am not refusing, Clara. I am simply going to have my attorney review it first. Her face tightened. The company needs certainty on this transition immediately. Then put every instruction in writing, I said. Send me an email stating that my refusal to sign this document today will result in immediate termination, or that my duties are being stripped regardless of my signature. The room went quiet. That was the first time Clara understood that I was not reacting emotionally. I was recording. I stood up, left the packet on the table, and walked out of the room. In the elevator, my phone buzzed again. Julian's team wanted my transition files by the end of the day. Bradley wanted a formal handover schedule. Payroll wanted confirmation of my reduced compensation. They were moving fast because they thought speed gave them power, but speed makes people careless, and careless people write things down. By the time I reached my office, I understood the shape of their plan. They wanted to cut me down, keep my knowledge, hand my authority to Julian, and hope I would be too embarrassed to fight. They wanted my job, but they did not understand the system holding it together. And they had no idea that the moment they tried to take it, they had started the clock on their own mistake. That night, I did what Bradley Thorne should have done. I read my contract. I sat at my dining room table with my laptop, a yellow legal pad, and the original executive agreement that Valor's board of directors had signed 5 years earlier. 5 years earlier, Valor was desperate. The old board needed me to stay through the private equity takeover because the business was too fragile to survive another leadership loss. Drivers trusted me, and clients called me directly. The warehouse teams knew I would answer the phone at midnight. So, the board gave me protection. It was not charity. It was a guardrail. The investors knew that once the company was stable, a new chief executive officer might come in, claim credit for the recovery, and try to push out the people who had done the hard repair work. They knew the easiest way to force an executive out was not always firing them. Sometimes it was cutting their pay, stripping their authority, and waiting for them to quit. That was why Section 14 existed. Good reason. Under the agreement, if the company changed control and then cut my pay, reduced my core duties, forced me to report to someone with less authority, or damaged my role, I could resign for good reason. Legally, that would not be treated like I walked away. It would be treated as a constructive discharge under Delaware law. And if Valor pushed me out, my golden parachute activated. Accelerated equity, severance, unpaid bonus value, retention grants, and tax protection would all be paid in full. The total package was worth up to $110 million. I read the clause slowly, then wrote the facts on my pad. 70% salary cut, bonus freeze, operating divisions removed, authority transferred to Julian Vance. Bradley had stepped on every tripwire at once. I opened the human resources packet Clara had given me. It said the compensation adjustment was effective immediately, my bonus was suspended, and my operational responsibilities would be reassigned. I was expected to assist with transition. Assist. That word did more damage than Bradley knew. I was not being asked to lead anymore. I was being asked to hand over the keys. At 10 o'clock and 36 minutes in the evening, I emailed my employment attorney, Diana Frost. I sent the meeting notice, the human resources packet, the new organization chart, the compensation memo, and my notes. Then I wrote, "Please review whether today's actions trigger good reason under Section 14. Diana replied just after midnight, "Daniel, the trigger appears serious and fully documented. Do not resign yet. Under the contract terms, we need to send formal notice and give the company a chance to cure the breach." A chance to cure was a crucial step. I had to notify Valor of the breach. Then they had 10 business days to restore my salary, restore my duties, and correct the reporting structure. If they fixed it, the parachute stayed closed. If they refused, it opened. The next morning, I came to work exactly on time. People were watching, waiting to see if I would break. Bradley wanted emotion because emotion would help him, so I gave him nothing. The first email went to Clara, confirming our discussion. My salary reduction is effective immediately, my bonus plan is frozen, and my operational divisions are being reassigned to Julian Vance's strategy group. Please confirm if this reflects the directive. Clara replied 32 minutes later, confirmed. These changes are part of the leadership cost reset approved by the chief executive officer. I saved the email, then I emailed Bradley. Please confirm whether the removal of Northeast distribution, national routing, driver relations, and warehouse recovery from my office is permanent or temporary. His reply came fast. Daniel, legacy executives need to adjust to market reality or make room for leaders who will. Julian will take direct oversight. I saved that too. Then Julian sent a message with 3 board members copied. Please accept the new structure and stop acting like operations belongs to you, Daniel. The company is moving past the rescue era. I saved the email and added it to my trigger record folder. After that, I called the people who actually understood the business. Maya Patel, the finance deputy, told me Julian's team had asked finance to model cuts to our backup shipping routes, treating them like waste. They are not waste, I told Maya directly. They are penalty protection for our largest accounts. I know, she said. That is why I called. Next was Keith Miller, head of client accounts. He told me Apex Retail Partners had a written emergency escalation promise tied directly to my office. If we missed their holiday delivery windows, contract penalties stacked up fast. Then I called Sarah Kemp, director of driver relations. Julian wants to change weekend scheduling, she said. It will break the driver retention agreement we signed last winter. Diana Frost sent the formal good reason notice that afternoon. It stated that Valor Transport Services had materially reduced my compensation, frozen my bonus, removed operational duties, and changed my reporting structure, constituting a constructive discharge and a breach of contract under Delaware law. It gave the company the required 10 business days to cure. Bradley treated the letter like an empty threat. 2 hours after receiving it, he sent an email to the board calling my notice a greedy stunt. He said I was trying to extort the company. Diana forwarded the message to me. He is confirming his own intent, she wrote. By Friday, the trigger record had meeting notes, human resources confirmations, organizational charts, compensation memos, Julian's emails, client risk warnings, and Bradley's own words. They were documenting why they did it. Bradley Thorne had 10 business days to cure the good reason notice. He lasted 3 days before making his mistake worse. On Wednesday morning, I received a calendar invite for an Apex Retail Partners renewal call. Apex was our largest account. Their freight moved through 8 states, 4 warehouse hubs, and more than 200 weekly routes during peak season. Losing them would shake investor confidence and destroy our quarterly numbers. The invite listed Julian Vance as the operations lead. My name appeared under a smaller line, transition support. I looked at those 2 words for a long moment. That was Bradley's plan. He was not just cutting my pay. He wanted my own clients to see me as the past. He wanted Julian to sit in my chair before the cure period ended so the board could claim the transition was already complete. But it was not complete. I joined the video call from conference room. D. Bradley sat at the head of the table. Julian sat beside him, a polished presentation deck open on his laptop. Clara Finch was not on the call, but I knew she was nearby. People like Clara always stayed close when something needed to look clean afterward. On Apex's side were their procurement director, Miriam Gale, their logistics counsel, and 2 regional supply managers. Miriam had worked with me for 5 years. She had the kind of calm, unreadable face that meant she was listening harder than anyone else in the room. Julian opened the call with confidence. We have reviewed the network, he said, and we believe the old model is overbuilt. We can reduce backup routes, simplify weather response, and create a leaner system without affecting delivery quality. I did not move. I did not speak. But inside, every warning light came on. Apex's contract was not normal. After a winter storm failure 3 years earlier, I had negotiated emergency delivery protections to keep them from walking away. They had strict holiday penalty windows where delays cost real money. They had storm response guarantees that required backup lanes to remain available even when they looked wasteful on paper. Julian had just proposed cutting the safety net under one of the most sensitive contracts in the company. Miriam Gale looked at the slide for a few seconds. Then she asked, "How does this plan protect our blackout window shipments during regional storms?" Julian smiled. The new model uses dynamic routing to reduce excess coverage and lower costs. That does not answer my question, Miriam said, her voice flat. The room tightened. Bradley leaned forward, trying to smooth things over. Miriam, what Julian is saying is that Valor has moved beyond overbuilt legacy caution. We are modernizing our logistics. There it was again, legacy caution, a phrase men used when they wanted to make experience sound like fear. Miriam looked past Bradley and directly at my camera window. Daniel, she said, does this new plan match our service guarantees? For a second, nobody in the room breathed. Bradley's eyes shifted toward my screen, warning me without words to fall in line. I could have stayed silent. That would have been safer in the short term, but it would not have been safer for the company, or for the contract, or for the record. So, I answered carefully, the proposed changes require further legal and operational review before implementation, Miriam. Based on my understanding of the Apex agreement, removing certain backup routes may conflict with emergency service guarantees and holiday delivery protections. Julian's face went blank. Bradley's jaw tightened. Miriam did not look surprised. She looked relieved that someone had finally spoken the truth. Then we will need written assurance from the board of directors before we continue any renewal discussions, Miriam said. After the call ended, Bradley waited until the Apex team had disconnected, then he turned on me. That was completely unacceptable, Daniel. I closed my notebook. I answered a direct question from our largest client, Bradley. You undermine company leadership, Julian said, his voice rising. I identified a contract risk, I replied. You made us look divided, Bradley said, standing up. No, I said, the plan made us look unprepared. Julian pushed back from the table. You cannot keep sabotaging every improvement because it was not your idea. I looked at him. I negotiated that contract after your proposed improvement nearly cost us the account the last time. I know what happens when the trucks stop. Bradley pointed a finger at me. This is exactly why the old structure had to change. I took out my phone and opened a blank email. Please confirm whether I am being directed to withhold contract risk information from a client, I said. I am not putting that in writing, Bradley said, his voice dropping. But later that afternoon he sent an email anyway. He wrote that my negative commentary on the Apex call was further proof that I could not support the new leadership model. He accused me of using contract concerns to slow down necessary corporate reform. I forwarded the email to Diana. Then I added it to the trigger record. By the end of the day, Apex retail partners had officially paused all renewal talks and requested board-level written assurance. Bradley had tried to prove I was replaceable in front of my client. Instead, he proved Julian did not understand what he had been handed. The Apex pause changed the temperature inside Valor overnight. Before that call, Bradley could still pretend this was only about my compensation. He could tell the board that I was upset, overpaid, and resistant to change. He could make the story small enough to fit inside one human resources folder. But Apex made the story much bigger. By Thursday morning, the chief financial officer's office was asking for revenue exposure numbers. The Apex account was worth hundreds of millions of dollars over several years. It was not the kind of client you placed at risk to help a new strategy officer look powerful. Driver relations also started flashing red. Sarah Kemp sent memos showing confusion and anger in 3 regions after Julian's team announced weekend scheduling changes without checking the retention agreement. Warehouse managers complained that the new operating map ignored crisis exceptions. One regional director wrote, "These routes look inefficient because they are designed for failure conditions." That sentence should have been printed and framed. A system built for crisis always looks expensive to someone who has never survived one. Bradley tried to control the damage by making it personal. He told the board I was bitter because my pay had been reduced. He said my golden parachute demand was selfish. But Diana Frost was no longer letting him own the story. She sent the full trigger record to the board's compensation committee and outside counsel. It included my executive agreement, Bradley's meeting statements, Clara's written confirmation, the organization chart, the compensation memo, Julian's emails, the Apex call notes, the client renewal pause, and the formal good reason notice. The file was clean and indisputable. Outside counsel reviewed the file faster than expected. That afternoon, Maya Patel from finance called me. "Daniel, the compensation counsel is in the building," she said. They are here for your contract. That was the moment I knew the board had finally seen the real number. $110 million. The explanation was simple. If Valor did not cure the changes, my exit package would be enforceable under Delaware law. And if the board knowingly ignored the contract after receiving notice, they could turn an employment dispute into a breach of fiduciary duty under Delaware General Corporation Law Section 141. That meant litigation, investor questions, client instability, and a chief executive officer whose first cost-cutting move had created a nine-figure liability. Bradley did not take it well. He pushed back, writing that paying me would reward disloyalty. But the chief financial officer finally warned the board chair that a public fight with me could freeze financing talks, scare Apex, and damage confidence in the post-takeover leadership plan. At 6 o'clock and 2 minutes in the evening, I received a formal notice, mandatory attendance, compensation committee review. The attendees listed were Bradley Thorne, Clara Finch, outside compensation counsel, selected board directors, and me. The room assignment was the executive boardroom. The executive boardroom was not the same room where Bradley had cut my salary. This meeting felt different. There were no slides about market reality. Just folders, laptops, outside counsel, and a long table full of people who had finally realized Bradley's performance had a price. I arrived with Diana beside me. Bradley was already there, his shoulders tight and his face controlled. Julian was there too, trying to look calm. Clara Finch sat 2 seats away. The board chair, Lillian Drake, opened the meeting. We are here to review the good reason notice submitted by Mr. Albright and the company's cure options, she said. Bradley leaned forward. Daniel has weaponized a generous contract to punish the company for making hard business decisions. I did not answer. When someone is digging a hole, you do not interrupt the shovel. Diana Frost opened her folder. The documents do not support that framing, she said. Lillian Drake looked at me. Daniel, explain your position. I kept my voice even. On Monday morning, Bradley announced that my salary would be reduced by 70%, my bonus plan would be frozen, and several operating divisions would be moved from my office to Julian Vance's strategy group. Human Resources then presented paperwork, confirming the change was effective immediately. I asked for written confirmation. The company confirmed it. I asked whether the authority transfer was direct and effective. Bradley confirmed it. Julian also confirmed that he expected me to accept the new structure. Diana slid the email packet forward. Valor had the right to restructure, but after the change in control, it did not have the right to materially reduce Mr. Albright's compensation, strip his core duties, and place those duties under a less experienced officer without either curing the harm or paying the agreed separation package. Bradley cut in. No one terminated him. Diana did not even blink. Intent is not the controlling issue under Delaware law. Actions are. The outside compensation counsel cleared his throat. The clause does appear to cover material compensation reduction and material diminution of duties after a change in control, he said. The written record is difficult for the company. Then the compensation consultant opened the valuation file and read the numbers. Accelerated equity, severance multiple, unpaid bonus value, retention grants, tax protection. $110 million in estimated structured value. Lillian Drake turned to me. Can the company cure? Yes, I said. Restore my salary, restore my bonus plan, return the operating divisions to my authority, remove Julian from direct control over my teams, send a corrected communication to Apex, confirm in writing that there will be no retaliation. Bradley's chair scraped back as he stood up. No, he said. I cannot lead a company where one executive can hold the board hostage with a legacy contract. I watched Lillian Drake's face harden. Bradley had just done it again. He had been offered a cure, a clean way to stop the trigger, and in front of the board, Human Resources, and outside counsel, he refused. After Bradley refused to cure, the board asked us to step out. 40 minutes later, Lillian Drake called us back in. Lillian spoke carefully. The board has determined that a controlled separation is in the company's best interest. Outside counsel added, the company will recognize Mr. Albright's good reason trigger as valid, subject to final settlement documentation. There it was, signed into reality. The settlement took 2 weeks to finalize. The total package came to $110 million in structured value. The company admitted in writing that my compensation had been materially reduced, my duties had been materially changed, my client warning had been proper, my good reason notice had been valid, and the trigger had been caused by company action. That mattered more than the check. Bradley had tried to make me look replaceable. The final agreement made the opposite record. It said I had been right. Julian was removed from operations immediately. His plan was frozen before it damaged Apex further. Valor sent Apex a corrective operations letter. Apex renewed, but only after the board promised that no contract protections would be removed. Clara's human resources team quietly rewrote its executive transition process. Bradley lasted longer than Julian, but not by much. 3 months later, he resigned to pursue advisory opportunities. I knew what that meant. He had been removed softly, because removing him loudly would have embarrassed too many people on the board who had hired him. I did not return to Valor. They offered consulting work. They offered a special advisor title. They offered language about rebuilding trust, but I had no interest in being managed by people who only valued me after their mistake became expensive. I left with my reputation intact, my payout secured, and my name cleared in writing. 6 months later, I joined the board of a logistics technology firm that competed directly with Valor. They did not ask me to make operations look cheaper for a slide deck. They asked me how to build systems that survived pressure. On the day the final settlement binder arrived, I opened it in my attorney's office. The last page carried Bradley's signature. That signature confirmed everything he denied in the meeting, that his cost-saving move had activated the very protection he never bothered to read. He thought cutting my salary would make me smaller. Instead, his signature made me untouchable.